Steve Osho is an investment professional and a co-managing partner at Commercial Partners, an investment banking services group based here in Lagos. Steve is here to take the new year 2023 fiscal appropriations to the market straight for me. Great to have you bright and early in the new year. Welcome. Thanks for coming here. Great. Thank you so much. The budget is the first thing we're dining on this new year. So I'm going to ask you for your overview of the budget itself from an investment professional point of view.
Well, I think the budget has been presented by the President in the House yesterday, or by the Minister of Finance. Is just an attestament to the fact that the government is ramping up their tenure next year, and it reveals a lot of things that needs to be done. And it still shows the gap that we have between the expenditure that we are projecting as a country and the gap that we have in terms of revenue. I think that problem is still lingering on, because if you look at that budget, 21 trillion as against about 10.4 trillion for revenue, we still have a deficit of over 11 trillion that needs to be financed from somewhere. You know, I think that is the major highlight of the budget for me. Basic assumptions in the budget, we can argue back and forth in what is expected from those assumptions. But again, I think the major solutions or the major issues when it comes to our budget in Nigeria has actually not still been addressed. And I understand that the government is coming from the angle where it's becoming more and more difficult to actually generate more revenue or expand that, net of revenue. Even though from what the minister said, it looks like the revenue levels or streams have been diversified. But in terms of how much of that we need to be able to plug the gap we have in terms of deficit we have as a country, I think is still huge.
When a company, from a corporate point of view, when an organization diversified, definitely you should be earning more revenue. That's why you diversify.
Exactly. Well, so
because you're looking at source of revenue.
Exactly. If you look at what happened between 2022 and 2023 projection or budget now, you see that the revenue has actually moved partially of about 5% compared to how we move the expenditure. The expenditure has moved to about between 20 to 25%, which is creating that deficit. Because if you look at that budget deficit now, is actually moved from what we have in 2022 to 2023 by about roughly 40%, 39 to 40%.
So serious lag in here, serious lag.
Exactly.
The revenue lagging expenditure massively.
Exactly. So, and major areas we need to look at, because if you look at the contributions of oil revenue, you see that they're not relying so much on that. And you understand what happened in 2022, 2021, where we are not able to accrue so much to reserve because, there are a lot of, stealing, theft going on in that area. So that still has to be covered. Even though we're seeing a lot of flows coming from non-oil receipts, we've seen banking, and services actually increasing in numbers. We've seen agriculture contributing more to the revenue. We've seen some other sources, independent sources, actually coming or contributing more to the revenue. But again, we need to expand that. I think that's what we need to do as a country going to 2023.
So do you think the numbers from the budget truly reflect the state of the economy? So the projection by the IMF that we'll see a slower growth in 2023 will be realistic?
I think if you look at the realistic, or let me say the reason or the fact behind the numbers, you say, okay, they try to be as moderate as possible in coming up with all the assumptions. Yeah. If you look at the oil price is pegged at 75. I think it's still moderate. If you look at the production, it's about 1.69 barrels per day, which is still moderate. If we're able to make sure that we plug all the loopholes that we have within these, the theft we have within that sector. And if you look at the inflation number, 17.19, even though we know that we are operating at 21% levels right now, but we still think it's moderate. The area that have problem is the exchange rate, numbers, which is put at 435, and I think that is a bit just be over ambitious.
17% inflation, if you ask me, is high, considering the level of poverty and all that within the economy. 17% is a lot high. But in terms of catalyzing the urgently needed foreign and domestic investments, because again, we need to use what we have to get something from within and outside. So do you think this budget will be able to deliver this foreign investment inflows as well as mobilize domestic capital?
I think this budget is just for the government to say, you know what, I've done my best, I need to go.
So it's a transition project.
Yes.
It's a budget.
I think it's a transition budget from what I've seen. And I don't envy the next government because what they've done is just to say, you know what, I've done my best.
Congratulations. 77 trillion naira budget.
Exactly.
Our debt.
Exactly.
In your back pocket.
Yes. And I don't know how they're going to solve that, which means that, well, but you see, it tells you the story about people that are actually trying to vie for presidency right now. So whether it's 3 or the 4 major contenders that you have, it means that you must be ready to inherit a lot of issues. And you must actually put on your thinking cap to solve some of these problems.
I'm worried where we're going to get investments in with the budget we have on the ground. Do you think we'll be able to move anything this year, considering where we're coming from?
I think with the reform we have in the Petroleum Act, bill, the possibility is there that we're going to see a lot of investment or some of the investment come into that space going forward because there's going to be a lot of transparency from the MPC Limited, and if that is well managed and well done, then we'll probably see some investment coming from offshore in that area.
But we need investments into the real sector as well.
Well, yes, we're seeing a bit of
beyond oil.
Yeah, we're seeing a bit of investment in real sector. The only problem is just that we've seen that numbers have reduced significantly from the FDIs we've seen from 2020 till about now. So what we need to do, I think major issues need to be, look at, not just the budgeting. A lot of issues around the security, a lot of issues around, the exchange rate and all of that, the policies. So these are the things that a lot of investors will be looking at. We have the FPIs, we have the FDIs who are looking at different scenarios within the country before they actually can come in. So those are the issues that will come to play when you have investors that are coming in. But again, whatever you have overhang of election coming through in a country, especially in the emerging market, and especially in Africa, the possibility is there that most investors will always say, you know what, let's back up first. Then coupled with the issues we have with the Ukraine-Russian war, that has actually put a lot of investors on the back foot to say, let's watch what happens.
So that's what I'm looking at, how this budget will impact the financial markets, debt, stocks, other risky assets like currencies. What's your outlook at commercial partners?
Well, our outlook remains that 2023 is still going to be very interesting. I think from the asset class point of view, we're going to see a lot of we've seen a lot of demand now coming through the local space for the fixed income. You understand why? Because the yield is actually a bit elevated now. So a lot of people actually, mostly PFAs, are going to that sector. The reason why you've not seen most of the offshore investors coming to that space is most of the exchange rate issues and all of that, and inflation. So those are the issues that we have in that area. I think equity is going to struggle a bit because as much as you have, elevated yield, so a lot of investment will go to fixed income and all of that. But as long as maybe we see much of reduced borrowing, which I don't see coming to this year. If I look at the number of budget, the numbers we have in budget deficit this year, which is going to be funded from local borrowing and foreign borrowing from what is said in the budget. So it just means that we actually might have from now to probably the top quarter of this year, elevated yield curve, and at the same time will reduce the kind of investment that we have in equity space. But that being said, I think a lot of smart investors will be looking at some good quality asset class, especially when it comes to equities. We cherry picks on some of those brands that we think that they can give you returns over time, and I think that's what the cash flow will chase. How
do you think the monetary policy authorities will respond to this budget and the entire outlook for the new year when they meet on January 24th? Because about 3 weeks from now.
I think January meeting will probably just reflect on what happened between the last meeting that they had and how the economy is playing out between that time and now. To be able to determine what they're going to do in terms of measure. Inflation is still a threat, and it still is a global threat, and I think they're going to be worried about that and going to be concerned about that. The exchange rate is still an issue, and is causing a lot of imported inflation and all of that. So that is going to be looked at from the CBN point of view. But in terms of what strategy they're going to take going to the next meeting, yes, I'm not too sure it's going to be aggressive. I think they're just going to watch for now to see what happens.
Yes, okay. Perhaps it's still early in the year. Maybe watch how the election goes in February, exactly, and then you can decide what to do in March.
Exactly.
I think that's what the MPC will do. Well, so it's most likely
it's just going to be one of those reasons they're going to consider.
Interesting. Quite an insightful comment. Thank you. We appreciate that from you and your team on the budget and the market. Have a pleasant evening. That's Steve Osho, our co-managing partner at Commercial Partners Limited.